What if I proposed an idea that the render processes of the simulation were nothing more than one unit of force which was decompressed into an infinitely possible amount of modes, which being the ultimate form of compression in running a computer program, I guess, which would be the equivalent, and that this reality was just a decompression, every force, every density in this reality was just a decompression of one unit. Say if we took frequency to being that unit, or because it doesn't matter which unit you take, but say if we took frequency, and let's say the highest resolution of the program, the computer code, was the highest possible frequency in this dimension, being Planck frequency, which is, I won't get to it now, but the true Planck length, calculated slightly differently from the units on the internet, c being the speed of light, divided by the true Planck length. Let's say that that was the highest possible frequency and the smallest, equivalent to the smallest pixel of resolution running in a simulation. What if every other mode, such as the density in my body, the density of the air, the density of the vacuum in space, which it does have a density, hence perhaps why no pure vacuum can be achieved. What if all of those densities were just a decompression of the one unit? So let's take frequency. Therefore, the atomic realm and all the atoms would have a specific frequency, as they would be a decompression further up the density of well, I guess it depends, doesn't it, how what composition they are reflects what density. Hence, each composition would have a specific frequency. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have a suspicion, and this is highly unrefined, but I have a suspicion that reality appears to be so much more complex than the way it is rendered in the simulation. And there is a framework beginning to emerge in my mind, and has been for a while, which also goes into the machine and how that works, and that is that I think all things are just a decompression of one unit of force. That decompression, and depending on where that decompression is, assigns the signature so that the simulation can render it the equivalent, if that makes any sense. In other words, the density of something is the signature which the simulation is tuned to. The simulation, or the computer render processes of this reality, see the signature by the densities that make up the atomic world and the subatomic world. but those densities are a decompression of the one unit, the beginning unit in space-time. However the forces might be seen, but all the forces are just the one. All of the forces seem to come to just one. Very hard for me to explain, but the way I see it, the machine and the render processors of the matrix have built into it functions based on, well, preloaded functions based on how you manipulate the atomic world. If you can access one of these preloaded functions, which is the nature of the design of the machine, if I was truly able to access one of the preloaded inside the simulation functions, then it's like we're living in Microsoft Paint. It's like we're living in the program. And what I'm doing, let's say we're living in a Microsoft program of some sort, whether it be TurboCAD or Microsoft Paint. An analog to what I'm doing is, let's say if we're in TurboCAD and you want to draw a line or a triangle, it's always going to go to the pyramid with me, in Microsoft Paint. You just get the mouse and you click on the pixels and they will, at the resolution set, fill in the spaces that you draw to whatever resolution it is. What if the equivalent to that in this reality, because we are in the simulation, whether our minds are or not, it's irrelevant. Our senses are confined to the simulation. What if the equivalent to drawing a line in the Microsoft Paint program was actually the equivalent to having highly conductive metallic lines constructed in this atomic domain, such as a copper frame in the shape of a pyramid with a specific angle and a specific dimension or height and a specific thickness, even a specific composition of metals, a percentage of copper, percentage of silver, percentage of platinum, for example, in order to achieve a specific density which might in fact be preloaded into the computer simulation, so that when you create the environment or you mimic the preloaded program in the simulation using the atomic world, the lines of copper at a certain angle, at a certain height, at a certain composition, let's say mostly copper, with other constituents. What if that was a command? What if just that prerequisite of creating, or that action I should say, of creating the pyramid frame that has the correct coordinates, dimensions I should say, the correct thickness, the correct height, the correct geometry, correct everything, as a basic example. What if that was a commandment to tell the simulation to do something, a specific function? That alone may not be enough, but what if you took it a step further? What if you scaled the densities of the atmosphere within that frame? What if those densities matched the wavelength, the fundamental wavelength of that frame, which was derived from the mathematics of the fundamental beginning unit and all of its equivalents: length, mass, time, speed, frequency, angle, density, energy density, temperature. The list goes on. But what if you matched and created a form which literally gave the simulation a commandment in order for it to respond? Hence, a glimpse into the understanding of how these technologies may be possible. The hyperdimensions are hidden from us because perhaps they only reveal themselves if you can communicate with them, you see. And the knowledge of mathematics to do so, an absolute cruciality for their infinite combinations of geometry that can exist within the space of my hands. Only certain forms may unlock the key, and if so, only the understanding is the pathway to being able to do that. Now, there's something that I've always been mind blown by. Mind blown. And when we talk in compression of the simulation and how the rendering processes of it are probably quite advanced, I think to myself of another simulation which already exists. And that's a game called The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that game is probably the most spiritual experience I ever had inside of a computer, as being a computer-based or console computer-based experience that my mind extracted bliss and joy and spiritual enlightenment from. A game so sacred I don't even play it because it's so special. And the reason it's so special to me is because of all of the channels it can unlock in my mind, which no other form of media or no other program has even come close to matching. The spiritual experience and profound, humble, true bliss and nostalgia and every rich, noble emotion I got from playing that game. I could talk about it forever, but this is what blows my mind the most. That game, that entire universe, that realm of magic. And quote me if I'm wrong, but it was all compressed and based off of a 16 megabyte cartridge, which is nothing compared to the energy or the magic contained within it. It's probably not exactly 16 megabytes, but it's somewhere in that range. It's not a lot. My memory fails me. Mathematically, it's a straightforward process to understand. Apparently, the compression, the highly advanced compression techniques that Nintendo used at the time to achieve such a high quality of audio and graphics for that time, and such an extensive and real, heartfelt story and world that they created from 16 megabytes. That whole universe, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, is condensed into a 16 megabyte cartridge. Perhaps something to reflect on. I guess the main points that I wish to express is that this reality is probably highly compressed using a form of compression which we may not be able to yet understand. I don't doubt that we'll be able to mimic it one day, because whether or not the laws of the simulation are different to the laws of this reality, because in actuality they very much would have to be, but the same can still be mimicked. I have no doubt that whoever created the simulation did it only after they realized that they themselves were in one. Whether it have been a spontaneous happening or who knows. The point is, I guess, that there is such, admiration I have for the highly sophisticated powers of knowledge when it comes to applied knowledge. And that this reality may not be as complex as it appears to be when it comes down to the central processes of the core. I don't know. But what I'd really like to express and emphasize in this video, most of all, from the beginning, which touches on this compression, and that is that more and more evidence suggests to me that one unit of force decompressed into different modes of density, frequency, what have you, all of the known forces, may be the only ingredient in the simulation, the only thing that makes up everything. Every possible atomic mode, we're only familiar with the atomic world. I think it's just one unit decompressed into different modes so that it has a different value, which gives rise to the infinite complexities of this great grand illusion, which is awesome. I think it's better knowing that we're in a simulation. It's far more interesting, because then it gives rise to ideas like, maybe it can be hacked, maybe we can find the back door. Maybe I have found the back door. And we're going to explain it 1,000 different ways. The one that I've chosen to in this video is that, yes, I think programs are preloaded into the simulation for those able to access them, so that they can literally interface with the program by creating in the atomic world the IP address that links to that program. The IP address that comes in the form of a geometric shape. Obviously, the program would have to probably contain within it well, in my case, it's not just a geometric shape, it has laws on how it operates. But perhaps only certain modes are available. I mean, it makes you wonder. I mean, there's a lot of folklore and stuff saying that these symbols have power and whatever. Maybe certain symbols do have power, and there is no way of ever understanding why they do. Well, obviously there would be with a much higher knowledge, but maybe some of these symbols have power because the symbols are actually commandments which have been preloaded into a part of the simulation. So hence, when you create the symbol, you're literally executing its meaning, because that shape is accessing a part of the simulation where that geometry is stored, and as soon as it does, the interface is created. If the shape is created correctly, the symbol, if it is created correctly, accurately, or the equivalent verbatim to matching what is stored in the simulation, in the files of the simulation, then its effect must be granted. And if you create it to a perfection, which undoubtedly you always need to create the vacuum to perfect, because scaling the densities is one of the greatest powers that you can, in my opinion, have over the simulation, because you're literally scaling its fundamental unit of force. Because just remember, that if you can scale the density of the vacuum, you are able, literally, to scale length. You can scale. That is scaling. And the way this works mathematically, to scale density is to scale length. And length is geometry. If all is tuned to the same force, there must be an interface. The leap of faith in this video is to state that there are programs in the simulation which exist. If you have that program knowledge, which I spent 32,000 hours extracting that knowledge for one program verbatim to get the perfect match, the perfect version of it which is stored in the files of the simulation. To build that in the atomic world is all that's required. Thereafter, it will execute its function. So that's the theory, and another angle, I guess you could say, on, or insight into how and why this might all work and be possible, without thinking of it in a physics sort of point of view, jumping right outside that arena and thinking that, yes, physics always applies, always, in the atomic world, always. But what if there are forces we don't yet understand, because they're hidden until you literally summon them using geometry? Some people might use their mind. I prefer geometry. Food for thought.